which was an enigmatic, powerful radio signal that definitely came from outside of this Earth. We don't know from where. It was coming from a source that was approaching the sun.
What would you think if an interstellar object began shaking so violently that telescopes detected a pulse every 147 seconds, as if something inside were forcing its way out? That is what 3I Atlas is doing right now. Its rotation stays unnaturally stable while its body trembles in rising waves, and the pulses match the direction of the old wow signal. Even Avi Loeb has warned that the pattern looks too precise to ignore, and each new shake pushes the mystery closer to a breaking point. The first signs of violent shaking inside 3I Atlas. The first real warning that something was deeply wrong with 3I Atlas came when telescopes detected a strange internal tremor repeating in a clear cycle. At a distance where interstellar visitors remain silent and frozen, this object began shaking in short waves that spread across its body like pressure rising from within. The trembling did not behave like natural cracking or simple stress. It followed a precise rhythm that matched the alleged radio pulses arriving every 147 seconds. These pulses came along band signals that seemed to rise from the same direction as the object itself, creating the sense that the shaking and the radio bursts were part of one process. Researchers also noted that its rotation remained unnaturally stable during every tremor. Most interstellar objects wobble or tilt when under stress, but 3I Atlas moved like a balanced bullet. No flicker in brightness, no shift in angle, no sign that the violent shaking was affecting its spin. That stability created an even deeper concern because it suggested some kind of inner structure working to keep the body steady while something inside pushed against the shell. Avi Loeb examined the pattern with caution, pointing out that the path of 3I Atlas aligns closely with the region associated with the old WOW signal from 1977. The connection may be a coincidence, but the matching direction and the repeating pulse cycle raised questions that no one could ignore. The object did not behave like a natural fragment from deep space. It behaved like something carrying a process that did not match normal physics. And with each cycle, the shaking grew more intense, suggesting a rising pressure building towards something no one had seen before. The strange radio pulses that match the shaking. As 3I Atlas drifted closer, the shaking inside its structure grew stronger, and radio telescopes began detecting something even more troubling: a low-band electromagnetic pulse repeated in a precise rhythm every 147 seconds, never drifting even by a fraction. This timing matched the internal shaking recorded through brightness analysis, creating a direct link between the vibration and the signal. Natural objects do not pulse like this. They crack, they flare, they react to heat or pressure, but they do not send out perfectly timed bursts that stay consistent over days. The regularity of these pulses made researchers question whether the source was mechanical or systematic rather than chemical. Some monitoring stations reported that the pulses carried hints of structured patterns, with early interpretations suggesting sequences that resembled mathematical progressions. While unconfirmed and debated, the repeated claim circulated that the radio bursts contained shifts similar to prime number spacing or early Fibonacci spacing. Avi Loeb noted another important detail: the direction of these pulses closely matches the region from which the WOW signal originated decades ago. The WOW signal was a single, unexplained burst, and its source has never been confirmed. The fact that 3I Atlas arrived from a similar direction gave the new pulses a weight they would not otherwise carry. The shaking of the object and the radio bursts seemed tied, as if both were symptoms of a deeper process. Another strange part is that during all this activity, the rotation of 3I Atlas remained perfectly steady. No wobble, no tilt, no sign that the shaking affected its spin. A rotation so perfectly stable, it defies nature. While the shaking and the 147-second pulses drew most of the attention, another detail made 3I Atlas even more unsettling. Through all the internal tremors, through every rising pulse, the object kept spinning with a stability that no natural visitor should have. Interstellar objects almost always wobble. Their shapes are uneven, their surfaces crack as they warm up, and their rotation shifts when pressure builds. But 3I Atlas moved in a straight line with a rotation that looked engineered rather than accidental. Its brightness variation stayed almost flat, showing no sign of tilt or drift. This stability became more alarming as the shaking grew worse. Any natural object under that kind of internal stress would wobble wildly, yet this one remained centered and calm on the outside, while something inside pushed and trembled with rising strength. The contrast made the shaking look deliberate, almost like the outer structure was designed to stay balanced no matter what happened inside. That idea is not proof of anything, but it explains why so many researchers began calling this object the most unusual interstellar visitor ever recorded. Avi Loeb pointed out that highly stable rotation, paired with internal vibration, is not something nature produces often. It looks more like controlled stabilization, the kind that keeps an object aligned while an inner mechanism works. Add to that the repeated 147-second pulses and the violent shaking, and the behavior becomes even harder to categorize. Nothing about this motion fits the model of a comet or asteroid. The stable rotation also affected its path. With no wobble to distribute force unevenly, every internal tremor pushed the object in the same direction. These small nudges accumulated over time, shifting its trajectory closer to the region of the inner system. The shaking continued to rise. The pulses stayed constant, and through it all, 3I Atlas spun like a perfectly balanced device, moving with intention rather than randomness. The violent shaking begins to change its path. The shaking inside the 3I Atlas did more than create internal stress. It began to influence the way the object moved through space. When an interstellar visitor travels through our system, its path is usually steady and predictable, shaped by gravity alone. But as the tremors inside 3I Atlas grew stronger, its trajectory shifted in small but consistent steps. Each time the vibration peaked, the object drifted slightly off the expected curve. The timing of these movements matched the same 147-second pulse cycle detected through radio telescopes, suggesting the shaking was directly responsible for the nudges altering its direction. What made this even stranger was the steady rotation of the object. Without wobble or tilt, every internal push acted on the body in the same orientation. This caused the object to drift with surprising coherence, as if each pulse delivered a gentle push forward. Frozen objects do not guide themselves. They do not correct their direction. They do not respond to internal forces in repeated patterns. Yet 3I Atlas behaved as if each tremor pushed it along a chosen line. The more the shaking increased, the clearer the drift became. The path slowly bent toward the inner regions of our system, surprising the teams that tried to model its future position. They recalculated again and again, only to watch the predicted curve shift after every strong pulse. Nothing about this motion matched natural behavior. The shaking created the same directional changes again and again. Moving looked coordinated instead of chaotic. The 147-second pulse grows stronger and more structured. As 3I Atlas moved deeper into the inner system, the 147-second pulse that first appeared as a faint radio whisper began to grow stronger and clearer. What once looked like a weak fluctuation slowly turned into a firm, repeating beat that matched the violent shaking happening inside the object. Radio telescopes across several countries reported the same timing with almost no variation. Each burst arrived like clockwork, steady and sharp, as if the source never tired or drifted. Natural emissions rarely hold this level of precision. Heat, pressure, chemical reactions, or magnetic fields always introduce irregularities, yet the pulse stayed locked to the 147-second cycle without missing a beat. More concerning were hints of structure inside the signal. When analysts studied the shape of each pulse, They found repeating rises that behaved like steps. Some early interpretations suggested spacing that loosely resembled prime number interval. Others claimed a soft curve in the pulse hinted at a Fibonacci-like pattern. None of this proved anything definitive, but the idea that mathematical spacing could appear inside an interstellar radio burst made the shaking and the pulse harder to dismiss as a coincidence. The speculation grew because the rhythm matched the internal vibration perfectly. Each strong tremor inside 3I Atlas arrived at the same moment the radio burst peaked, forming a direct connection between the shaking and the signal. Another unsettling part was how the pulse remained stable even when the shaking intensified. The object shuddered so violently that brightness variations spiked, yet the rotation stayed perfectly steady, and the 147-second signal never wavered. That stability made the object behave like something built to maintain balance even under internal pressure. Shaking reveals deep internal layers separating from within. As the violent shaking inside 3I Atlas grew stronger, telescopes began detecting signs that the object was changing on the inside. Instead of simple cracks or surface flaking, deep scanning showed thin arcs forming beneath the outer shell, almost like layers slowly pulling apart. These separations followed smooth curves that expanded outward in time with the 147-second pulse, revealing a coordinated process rather than chaotic damage. Natural objects break from the outside inward when heated, but 3I Atlas expanded from the inside outward as if pressure were building at its core. The violent tremors also caused subtle changes in its brightness pattern. Each time the shaking peaked, the separated layers shifted slightly, sending faint ripples of reflected light across the surface. These ripples were not random. They appeared at the same moment the radio pulse hit its strongest point, which made the internal movement look synchronized with the signal. This rhythm pushed the idea that the shaking was not an accident, but part of something deeper happening inside the object. The most troubling detail was how clean the separations looked. They were smooth, even, and slow, almost like a controlled expansion rather than a natural fracture. If the shaking had been caused by simple heat stress, the inside would twist and tear at irregular angle, but 3I Atlas behaved like something maintaining its structure while its core pushed outward. The stable rotation only made this stranger. Even as the inner layers moved apart, the object spun like a perfectly balanced sphere. No drift, no wobble, no tilt. The shaking creates light waves that travel across its surface. As the inner layers of the 3I Atlas continued separating, something new appeared that pushed the mystery even further. During the strongest moments of shaking, faint waves of light began sliding across the surface of the object, moving from one end to the other in slow, coordinated paths. These streaks did not come from sunlight or simple reflection. They appeared only when the internal tremors peaked and always in perfect sync with the 147-second pulse detected by radio telescopes. Each time the pulse surged, the surface brightened in ripples that moved like signals traveling across a shell. The violent shaking made the waves sharper each day. What began as soft ripples slowly grew into fully formed bands of light that wrapped around the object as if mapping the internal movement. Telescopes captured the same pattern rising again and again, proving the behavior was not random noise. The steady rotation made this even stranger. Despite the shaking, the object held a perfect spin that let the light waves move evenly across its surface without distortion. Avi Loeb pointed out that synchronized light waves combined with internal vibration and radio pulses form a trio of effects rarely seen in nature. If the shaking had a chemical cause, the light would appear irregular. If the shaking came from pressure alone, the glow would flare and fade randomly, but the repeated and timed waves suggested an organized process, something releasing energy through the layers at the exact moment the 147-second pulse reached its peak. The violent shaking spreads into its dust trail. As the shaking inside the 3I Atlas intensified, telescopes began noticing strange behavior in the dust trailing behind it. Normally, dust shed from an interstellar visitor forms a simple stream, pushed by sunlight and shaped by the object's rotation. But the dust from 3I Atlas bent in smooth curves that ignored both the direction of travel and the pressure of the sun. These curves repeated in the same rhythm as the 147-second pulse, showing a clear connection between the violent shaking inside and the movement happening outside. Every time the object trembled, faint arcs appeared in the dust, curling like ripples spreading across water. Some strands shifted upward, others sideways, some even bent backward for a moment before returning to their original path. This behavior made the dust look like it was responding to a force emerging from within 3I Atlas, rather than drifting in natural patterns. What made this even more strange was how coordinated the movement appeared. The dust did not scatter randomly. It flowed in layered waves that matched the timing of the internal pulses and the surface light ripples. Even with such violent internal shaking, the outer rotation remained almost unnervingly stable. This stability created a perfect stage for the dust to form repeating patterns. If 3I Atlas had wobbled even slightly, the dust would have stretched unevenly. Instead, it moved with grace that sharply contrasted the intense vibration happening inside. This contrast made the phenomenon feel even more unnatural. Avi Loeb noted that non-gravitational dust motion is one of the clearest signs that an object is releasing energy from within. But in this case, the pulses were timed too perfectly, making the dust behave like it was following instructions rather than reacting to random pressure. Some analysts speculated that the patterns might be carrying information since they aligned so closely with the electromagnetic bursts. While unproven, the idea gained attention because of how precisely everything repeated. The shaking begins to affect the space around the object. As the violent shaking inside 3I Atlas grew stronger, the effects began spreading beyond the object itself. Telescopes noticed faint distortions in the space directly surrounding it, similar to the subtle flickers seen near highly charged plasma or magnetic fields. These distortions appeared in the same 147-second rhythm as the radio pulses and the internal tremors. Each time the shaking peaked, the space around the object shimmered just slightly, almost like it was reacting to the force rising from inside. These atmospheric-like ripples were extremely faint, but they repeated with such precision that they could not be dismissed as background noise. Observers across multiple countries confirmed the same timing and pattern. Natural interstellar objects do not create rhythmic disturbances around themselves unless a powerful internal process is at work. The fact that these distortions matched the shaking hinted at an energy release taking place beneath the surface. One of the most unsettling details was that the shaking seemed to spread outward through the light, the dust, and now the surrounding space without disrupting the stability of the rotation. The object continued spinning like a perfectly balanced sphere. No wobble, no tilt, no signs of instability. This stability only made the external distortions more mysterious, because a natural object under violent stress should be throwing itself off-center. Avi Loeb noted that disturbances around an object can sometimes reveal hidden processes, but the timed pattern and synchronized pulses made this case different. Some analysts theorized that the internal shaking could be producing electromagnetic waves strong enough to affect the environment around it. Momentarily, others speculated about a deeper link to the wow signal, because the same region of space had produced unexplained bursts once before. If 3I Atlas carried a repeating internal process, it might explain why radio pulses and environmental distortions appeared together. The shaking reaches a critical level, and then something unexpected happens. As 3I Atlas moved even closer to the inner system, all the strange behaviors it displayed began rising together, as if building toward one final moment. The shaking inside the object grew so intense that its internal layers flexed with every surge. 147-second pulse, once a faint whisper, now arrived like a steady heartbeat that never drifted from its rhythm. The light waves sliding across its surface brightened, moving in smooth arcs that repeated the same path again and again. The dust trail curled behind it in perfect time, with each tremor forming loops that matched the pulse. The space around the object shimmered lightly with every burst of energy, showing that the shaking had reached a level strong enough to influence its surrounding. Yet despite all of this violent internal motion, the rotation remained impossibly stable. No wobble, no break, no shift. It moved like a balanced device set on a perfect axis. Even as the shaking rose to its highest recorded intensity, the object held together. This stability made the entire situation even more troubling. Natural objects do not keep equilibrium under such stress. They crack or tilt or break apart. But 3I Atlas stayed centered, almost as if the outer shell was designed to contain whatever was happening inside. The moment that shocked observers came when one of the strongest pulses rippled through the object. Instead of cracking apart, instead of exploding outward, the object briefly brightened across its entire surface, flashing in a single wave of light that matched the exact timing of the pulse. For a few seconds, the brightness rose in a perfect dome, as if the entire shell had responded at once. Then the light faded back to normal. Telescopes confirmed that the object did not fracture or slow down. Instead, after the flash, the shaking suddenly changed. It did not stop, but it shifted tone. The violent trembling softened into a more controlled pattern that repeated with the same 147-second rhythm. The internal pressure no longer looked chaotic. It looked organized. Thanks for watching another episode. While you are still here, make sure to click the video on your screen for more quality content.